Excellent.
Okay. Look in the chat window. Q&A. Cool.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Defense Against the Dark Arts, which is not really what it sounds like. We're not going to be doing any magic spells or anything like that, unfortunately. Right now, I'm Don Sakers. We've got Jay Smith here, and we're hoping Peter David will show up, but if it happens, it happens. So before we get completely started on the topic, Jay, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where we can buy your books and all sorts of fun stuff like that.
I'm Jay Smith. I'm a writer, podcaster. I produce audio drama series online. Most of my stuff dating back 10 years can be found at jsmithaudio.com. Most of it's free. I'd love for you to check out the books too if you have the time. I don't know what qualifies me to speak on behalf of women, but I was asked to be here, and I'm glad to listen as much as I will be asked to speak.
Okay, and I'm Don Sakers, a science fiction writer. I review books for Analog Magazine. I'm a retired librarian, so I guess in some weird way I'm partially a part-time woman, maybe, but yeah, we were talking before we actually started the panel about how strange it is to have three guys up here discussing the problems of online trolls and whatnot when we're not really the target of them. But we will do our best, and I do want to encourage folks in the audience to participate in the chat window. We want to have a dialogue rather than a lecture, so please jump in. And if you have specific questions, use the Q&A button. We found that the chat sometimes tends to zip by as lots of people chat, and we might miss a question, but if you put in Q&A, we're pretty sure we're going to get to it. Okay, so let's, and that looks like Peter David coming in. Okay, Peter, you're muted.
Well, it's Kathleen actually, but
oh, Kathleen, yeah,
good.
Hi there.
Great, a woman.
Yes.
This is something I've been dealing with for years, and I have stories.
Okay.
Background filters, none. I got sunshine coming in, so well, let's see if I can. If I move this way.
Oh, that's great.
There.
Although I don't know, your personality is kind of radiant anyway, so.
Thank you. No, it's Peter's out with Caroline. They're having a daddy-daughter day, so I think
nice.
this kind of slipped his mind. Caroline's had one hell of a week in terms of ups and downs.
Oh.
And she got headhunted by the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Ooh.
And Harvard.
Nice.
And Yale.
Wow.
She wants to go to FIT. Because they have an animation program and she wants to be an animator. But the American Academy of Dramatic Arts waived all fees and said that she was in first place for scholarship money because they want her in the honors program.
Fantastic.
Nice.
So have we started?
We're just starting. So why don't you introduce yourself? And
hello, I'm not Peter David. I'm Peter David's better half, some say. My name's Kathleen O'Shea David. Peter and I have been married for almost 20 years, and we've been together for 24. And I have been on the internet since the early times and have had to deal with all kinds of trolls. I was an assistant editor at Del Rey Books and got some real doozies out of that one. And I have run and do run various groups where I have to deal with people who are deciding that they want to take their anger out on Peter or whatever the topic is, and it's a mess.
Well, I guess we should start by addressing some of the things from the panel write-up, because that's possibly what people have come to hear. We're talking here about misogynist trolls and their ilk, which covers a lot of ilk there. But I think I feel odd, and I know Jay has said that he feels odd being a white guy talking about these problems, because we're not the target most of the time, and we try to listen to the folks who are, and so most of what we'll be talking about is things that people in our lives have told us about, and I mean, I occasionally as a gay man I get a little shadow of that sort of thing, but not anywhere near what Finnish women have to deal with it like every moment of their day. So Kathleen, I'm inclined to throw this out to you and say, what can we talk about?
Well, there's all kinds of things, because there's the online stuff, and you have to understand that I got involved in fandom back in the early 70s, where a woman at a convention, especially a comic book convention, was, rather than being normal, was an odd sight. And you got all kinds of reactions to it, including the fact that women in there were breaking up the boys club. When I first got hired at a comic book shop, the attitude seemed to be, why is she here? She's a woman. What does she know about comic books? And then I would be able to rattle off the X-Men's history from the first issue all the way through Australia. I could catch anybody up in about 20 minutes. That was my parlor trick. And eventually the people at the various shops I worked at came to respect me as somebody who was not, just there as the job, that I was a fan, and I knew what I was talking about, and I knew the history. And at that point I started meeting people. And then I got married to Peter, which was a whole other kettle of fish, because I had to yet again prove my science fiction and comic book chops to a whole new set of people who had not met me, other than the fact that I was Peter David's girlfriend. Less so now, especially like at a convention like Farpoint and Shoreleaf. Like you guys, you know who I am, what I can do, what my history is, and it's like, oh, she's just another fan. I will say it has gotten better, especially as more women feel comfortable to come to conventions and to express their opinions without having to worry about being shouted down by somebody else on the panel, which was a problem. Not for me. I tend to get my Irish up, and I would just shout them right back. So online, it really can be weird because of people saying inappropriate things or making comments that are uncomfortable. I'm a happily married woman. I'm in a monogamous relationship. That's how I am. I do not condemn anybody for whatever relationship works for them. Love is love, and you find the way to get it to work for you. But I still get hit on, and it's like, I don't know why you're doing this, but it's going to happen. The other thing is, because we are being more aware of what we're saying and how it affects others, a lot of behavior that used to be, oh, well, that's just so-and-so, he's like that, ignore him, is not flying anymore. And I'm so happy with that. I'm sure you guys have had that experience too, where, you observe something and it's like, nah, it's just so-and-so being so-and-so. And it's like, it just was so wrong. So I'll pass that to you guys.
Well, I've been in fandom. I started a little later than you did. Probably started getting active in the late 70s. And we have a comment from Maggie that says, agree with Kathleen, been going to cons since the late 70s, and yes, it has gotten better. And I kind of echo that. I remember when I first got into things, the big, gigantic topic was fantasy versus science fiction.
Oh God, that chestnut.
Which was code for women don't belong here. And it was the oh, well, fantasy isn't as rigorous as science fiction. Fantasy isn't blah blah blah, and I think one of the more distressing things is that over the years the trolls have gotten more obvious about what they're not couching things in fantasy versus science fiction anymore. They're just saying, well, you're a woman, what do you know about it?
Yeah. Plus, it was being able to hide behind Star Trek Fan 42 without a real name attached to it. I mean, I have two names on the internet. I have Catho David, which a lot of people know, and my other one is Puppet Maker, or more known Puppet Maker 40, because that was my live journal handle. So my personal philosophy, work for everybody, is anything I say on the internet, I will say to your face. And there are a lot of people who don't want to do that. Jay, you haven't said.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I came in a little bit later in the 80s. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and Creation Con was the big first nerd prom that came into our area, and it was very exclusive. And when girls and women showed up, they were the girlfriends and the hangers-on. And that was the attitude that was prevalent there. And it was offensive if a woman spoke up and asserted that knowledge. It was like you were infringing upon our birthright or whatever to know about Star Trek. And I guess I never really, if someone can engage with me in a conversation about something I love, I don't care who they are. That's a way that we overcome a lot of the problems that we have now. It just seems like everybody is we have to have our tribe, and our tribe cannot be infiltrated by others. The He-Man Woman Haters Club still exists, unfortunately, and I've seen that far more through the eyes of my wife and my stepdaughter, older. My wife is Dame Dahlia, who's at this convention as well, and she reluctantly got into cosplay, and I was very concerned for her because as a guy, I know the level of objectification that goes with that activity, and I spent a lot of time, holding my tongue and I wanted her to pursue something that made her happy and comfortable, and try not to be overly protective or the guy. But I ended up spending a lot of time as she began to come out of her shell and assert herself in fandom by dressing up in costumes, interacting with people, going to charity events, and generally being a much more worthwhile person than I am, and being in the background as a handler. And from my perspective as handler, while she is in character, I'm watching the shadows. And what I saw was very concerning for me. So it was made plain what even Pam was unaware of under the guise of her character.
Right.
It's very scary to think about how, what is atypical behavior that's acceptable and that we can engage in, nurture, and change and what do we need to intervene in immediately? That's been the question I've had for a long time, as someone who tries to get in between cosplayers and women in fandom and those creepy stalker guys that are always around when the photographers are out.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is a big problem in anime, which of
Yeah.
course is what Caroline's into.
Mhm.
You know, and she has she has various costumes. Interestingly enough, we both figured out that we mostly cosplay as men.
Hmm.
Uh, I think I've done a woman once,
Hmm.
but everything else has been male, and that's the kind of cosplay I'm comfortable with. But in the anime, I know from a bunch of friends of mine who are cosplayers who do anime and do a lot of the conventions as the professional cosplayers. You always have to have two people with you on the shoot that are your people.
Mhm.
One person is watching carefully to make sure the photographer is not taking anything like upshots,
Mhm.
especially when supposedly they're getting their camera together.
Yeah.
And also that that the subject is feeling comfortable with what they're being asked. And a lot of them have created phrases for each other so they can check in without El Creepo knowing that they're being questions are being asked about their behavior. And I've had friends literally, especially after an upshot or something like that, they will take the person's camera and literally delete everything.
Mhm.
Um, the only problem is with these new cloud phones.
Yeah. You can't delete it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but um, they have a lot of them have the photographers these days sign a rider that includes a clause, that basically says if you upload photos that I do not approve of, you are going to be facing a lawsuit. And it's sad that you have to do that. But male cosplayers have the same problem. I have a friend who he's a Spartan. He does the 300 costume and works his butt. He and his wife are both like bodybuilders, and they work their butts off in the gym and all the rest. And I was at a Dragon Con after the parade, and he was sitting, but he kept shifting a bit. And I asked him what happened, and his wife said women kept pinching his butt, and he now has bruises
Oh my God.
on his butt that he's trying not to sit on. So, Chapin asks, sometimes a man will simply have a difference of opinion with another fan who happens to be female, yet we're accused of misogyny, and yet we aren't, or have tried in our lives to be even-handed. Advice for men to how to handle this. That's an interesting one, because we know each other and we don't know each other. And sometimes when you meet somebody and you're just acting like yourself, then something you say or do that you never knew was offensive becomes offensive.
Yeah.
I got in trouble for using the words retarded development in something because I didn't know that retarded is off the list. Nobody told me, and I caught holy hell on that. And it's like, okay, what's the term? Developmentally disabled. Fine, I used that, and then I got in trouble for that one. Yeah. The whole thing is before we said retarded, which means retarded growth, was moron.
Yeah.
And retarded was the nicer phrase to get rid of moron. So sometimes you just can't win.
Yeah.
honestly, I wouldn't worry about it. I know, you want to defend yourself and all the rest, but in those situations, honest to God, just back up. You're not going to change their minds. They're set in. They have actually, they have decided that you are this awful person, and we know you're not. So just kind of write that person off and figure you'll never talk to them again, because it's hard. And I'm sure you guys have said something and somebody's gotten their dander up, and what you said was it was totally innocent. It was either it was taken out of context, half the sentence was heard, or they read more into what you said than what you said.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry, go ahead, Don.
No, you go ahead, Joe.
I think the first thing is to just realize that there's no objective reality. There's no counsel behind that individual that's declaring for all circumstances and all things that you are hereby and never shall be a misogynist. De-escalation is really the only thing you can do in a situation by stepping back and listening. Accept that what they're feeling is real to them, and simply deal with it. I work in human resource management, and a lot of my work is that. It's simply hearing somebody complain about their job and realizing that inside their head, that is their life. Whether or not it's real is not in evidence at that point. You simply have to listen and process the reality of your own.
Yeah, I did that as a stage manager all the time. I have actors come up and they would complain for me about the weirdest stuff. And then I would have to kind of work to figure out exactly what the real problem was that was leading to the complaint. And then I would see what I could do, to satisfy it. Don?
Well, if someone accuses you of being misogynist, racist, ableist, whatever, I think you owe it to yourself and to everyone else to have your first thought be, oh, am I? Take it seriously, because so often we react defensively. No, I'm not. And then, but like Jay was saying, if it's real to the person who's talking to you inside their head, then it's real.
Yeah.
And you may think about it. And I worked at a library for quite a long time that had a large Black population, and it was wonderful. But every once in a while, we'd have people who would accuse us of being racist, because when you don't have very many defenses against the world, that's one that you can use. And many times I would stop and say, well, yeah, I can see why you would say that, because I'm soaking in it. I'm from a racist society, and in this particular case, I'm trying not to, and then either say, well, yeah, you've got a point, and I should have said that better, or blah blah blah, or to say, I don't think in this case that I am speaking from racism. I think the fact that you were hitting that other child with a baseball bat is a problem.
Yeah.
And,
well, and a lot of times, the anger being expressed, and this is something I learned in stage management, is not at you. You're the release valve. Something else has happened that has led to the blow up.
Oh, that's such a good point.
And sometimes, and as a stage manager, I knew if something was my fault, I was first to go, okay, I screwed up. Here's how I'm going to fix it. But if I hadn't screwed up, I usually let the person rant it out and ask pointed questions to try to get to exactly what the real problem was, as opposed to just getting waves and waves of anger thrown at me.
Yeah.
Everybody's not going to be your friend.
No.
As much as we would like to have a unified world, and everybody loves everybody, it ain't going to happen. We're too different. But I do believe that one can learn to work with just about anybody. There are a few exceptions, but you have to learn how to speak their language so they feel safe in expressing themselves. And a lot of the anger then goes away because they trust you enough to come to you and actually tell you what the problem is, as opposed to coming up for a reason why this is a problem.
We have an interesting comment from Maggie. He says, I'm learning that the more angry and defensive I feel, the more likely it is that I need to listen because it's something I need to know.
Yeah.
The author and linguist Suzette Hayden Elgin always used to say, if someone is talking to you and what they're saying sounds crazy, you need to stop and imagine a world in which what they're saying is true. And if you can do that, then you might see it from their viewpoint, and it might still be crazy, but at least you'll know where they're coming from.
Why they're thinking it the way they're thinking it. Peter has to deal with a lot of trolls. And I'm right there with him. Occasionally, I just kind of hop in and get rid of stuff because he doesn't need it. And you know, and there are some people who literally take pride in pissing Peter David off. That's their amusement. Yeah, well, we all know Peter. We all know Peter will express his opinion. We all know Peter will express his opinion loudly. However, Peter does listen. You know, he has changed his point of view on something after being given evidence to show that what he believed was false. You know, that he was given bad information or prejudicial information that led him to a wrong decision. So he'll say, I was wrong, my bad, you know, I see what your point is. You know, I will not do this behavior again or say this thing again because it was wrong. You know, and then he gets shit for that because he's not standing up for himself.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a trend that really just my, you know, Madeline Kahn talking about, you know, and the pain, yeah. When people just, you know, their greatest joy in life is tearing other people down. They feel so bad about themselves. The only way they can make themselves feel better is by making other people feel worse. And then they take pride in it, and it only lasts for a little while.
Yeah.
And then they're off on trying to find their next thrill. So
I'm thinking of what practical advice we could give people, you know, who are facing things like this. And Kathleen, when you were talking a little while ago about photographers and all that, I remembered my husband runs the Masquerade at Shore Leave, and
does a good job.
Oh, well, thank you. But we the photo area is always a concern, and we had a married couple, a man and a woman, both of whom were rather physically imposing to begin with, and they said we want to try to be helpers at the photo area. And what they did was they put a box in tape on the floor that surrounded where the costumer stood, and it was a good 2 feet away from the costumer, and said the rule is that only the costume person can be in the box. If you're taking pictures, you can come up to the edge of the box, but you can't go in the box. And that, for whatever reason, that came across as more effective than you can't touch the costumer.
Oh, that's a biggie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if for me, I will come up to a costumer and say, may I see how you made blank? you know, and usually they're more than happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
But some people don't have barriers.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they don't understand why they can't.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we have to give them the can't.
Yeah.
So that we can make sure that the people in the masquerade, which is, you know, Tom and yours responsibility, feel comfortable to be able to attend the masquerade.
Yeah. Exactly.
Cosplay is not consent. Yes.
No.
Yes.
But going back to Jay being your handler for Pam, you know, if you have if you're not in a formal masquerade, but your handler could always do that, you know, say, okay, nobody can come within, you know, this amount of space. Don't get any closer than this because you might ruin her costume, or, you know, something like that. If you can avoid triggering them by challenging them, you know, because if you say don't be a creep, there immediately it's I'm not a creep, I'm, you know,
Right.
but
Right.
but if it's
they don't see themselves as creeps,
no,
which
they don't.
is, you know, it's like, but for a lot of them it's learned behavior from, and this goes for males and females because there's some creepy females out there too. It comes from how they were raised in terms of personal space. I'm not much of a hugger, but I'd hug you two because I know you two, you know.
Yeah.
I don't, people I know, I do not mind hugging. People I don't know who get into my personal space, gets a little, and it's true for males as well. Don, I'm sure you've had some occasions where, you know, again, as a gay man, you get, because sometimes you have fag hags.
Yeah.
And they tend to get a little touchy-feely and a little too close. Even though they don't have a shot in the world.
Yeah.
You know, it's like their personal Mount Everest.
Yeah.
And you know, and can you speak to that? I mean, I'm sure you've run into it.
Oh yeah, yeah, and not to single out women either, because there are, for every woman I've had who's been a clinger, I've had another gay man who also was a clinger, you know, and I tend to be a hugger, and I have really worked on training myself that you always ask, always ask, and accept the answer. You know, if
that's the other biggie.
You say, you know, would you mind if I hugged you? Well, no. Okay, well then,
yeah.
Or, you know, I'm not a hugger. Okay, no problem.
Yeah. No is no.
Yeah, exactly.
Jay? And it doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, or a chicken. No is no.
I do notice that a lot of the people who may be problematic just don't have the knowledge. They're, in some cases, they're starstruck. They're socially confused about how to approach a situation, and they come off negatively. And that's what I tend to do when I see somebody that's kind of lurking and I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. I'll directly engage them. And
that's a good point.
I will just walk up, hey, how you doing? Are you enjoying the convention? And I try to remind them just kind of subtly, if I see somebody who's kind of leering, I openly remind people that please make sure you talk about the work, the craft that goes into making these costumes. It's not about how good they look in the suit. It's about the work that went into it and the character that they're portraying. And trying to, especially when it seemed to be like Main Street mom and dad are there with their kids for the first time and they're not really sure what to make of the situation. It's really trying to explain and be an ambassador for what's actually going on and what we want to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Allowing the costume players to do what they want to do. And we're there to, as kind of the Jane Goodall among the apes kind of thing, just trying to explain to the third party.
Yeah. Sherry Rosen said, should cosplayers be assigned a square in space like in Times Square? And I mean, I think for photographs, yes. Usually, most people who are in costume tend to have a handler, or they're cosplaying with somebody else. So most of them have backups, and it's sort of on purpose. Anytime Caroline, most of the times at Shirley from Farpoint that Caroline is cosplaying, it's usually with her friend Adara. You know, and they tend to do, it's like they did Dipper and Mabel, and they had it spot on. People kept taking their picture because, you know, it looked like Dipper and Mabel. They've done anime costumes before, and actually found other people who like anime who recognize what they did. But Caroline always, when she costumes, travels in a pack. She feels safer that way. So, you know, but the online trolls is a whole other category.
Oh yeah.
And again, a lot of these people seem to want to make other people feel miserable. Currently, WandaVision is getting all kinds of just weird comments and people complaining about the oddest things and all the rest. You know, whereas other people who are just there to talk about it because they're enjoying the ever loving out of it, and they don't know what's going to happen next, and they want to speculate, and they want to be, you know, the enthusiasm's there, sometimes gets killed by somebody who just is like, well, you know, I know what's going on and you're totally wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I know a handful of people personally who do know, but they're not on the internet, and they're not going to spoil it anyway. God knows, I tried to get some answers, and they were like, nope, watch it. So, you know,
Yeah.
and and we sometimes talk about toxic fandom, you know, where it can get so bad that a place that was safe for people to talk about the thing that they love becomes such a troll farm that they don't feel comfortable talking anymore, and they tend to fade away from the group, which is sad because there was so much joy until this one person showed up.
I think one of the things that we can all do, and online or in person, is to be aware and be an ally. You know, if I know, I worked in libraries for my whole career, and there are a lot of ways that I'm only after retiring and dealing with lots of other people, I'm coming to realize that the culture of the library profession is completely different than a lot of other corporate cultures, mainly because it's a majority women, and you know, but one of the problems that would happen even in a library setting would be the person who would speak up in a meeting and say something and nobody would listen, and then, you know, 10 minutes later a guy would say the same thing and everyone would say, oh, that's a great idea, blah blah blah. Or the woman who couldn't get recognized to say something. And I took it as my personal mission to watch for that sort of thing happening and say, and specifically say, well, Joan wants to say something, let's hear from her.
Right.
Joan had that idea 10 minutes ago and no one listened.
Yeah. Yeah, I had that. I actually had that happen at Del Rey on more than one occasion, where, and it got to the point where I had a deal with one of the other male associates editors, because I would go to him and say, okay, I think we need to do this. He goes, oh, that's a brilliant idea. I said, okay, so you bring it up in the next meeting. He goes, but it's your idea. I said, tell them that after you say something. You know, and he would credit me for it, saying, you know, Kathleen came by and she was talking to me about this idea, and I think it's a great, you know, and this idea is her idea. And eventually we managed to pull it a bit to where they would listen to me.
Mhm.
But again, I'm 5'11" and built like a linebacker, so I'm not your delicate little woman.
I'll just add that I've worked in human resource management, and managers tend to not want to listen to us at all.
Yeah.
So when we have a director who is female, I've watched many good ideas and warnings go unheeded, simply for that reason.
Mhm.
One of the things that my boss told me after a particularly discriminatory conversation with a manager was that I had to apologize to her because no one was, I felt like things that were said to her would not have been said had she been a man.
Mhm.
And the thing she told me was, well, you have to be the one to change that because you're of their tribe.
Yeah.
And if you don't talk, who's going to listen? I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I don't, it's an extra burden on the side of those who are in control of the social group to be the ones who demand change, because it just seems like it doesn't happen otherwise. So I guess that would be if the people who are looking for ways to improve themselves in their environment, it works for HR, and in fact, you have to be your own agent of change.
Yes.
I've said that the only good thing about privilege is that you can use it to help dismantle privilege.
Yes. Very much
and
so.
I think that's kind of our obligation. Jay, you and I, as white cis men, we have to go to bat for folks, and that doesn't mean take over from a woman and defend her like the white knight or whatever. But it does mean speaking up when nobody else speaks up, and using your voice to echo what people are complaining about, and say, yeah, this is real. This is important. We don't do that here. Any other specific? Oh, I know. Wanted to specifically say in so many words that a lot of cons have anti-discrimination policies, anti-harassment policies, and if you are the victim, I urge you to go contact a committee member. And I've seen cons who will actually, throw somebody out because they were being obnoxious and harassing and things like that. And sadly, it's like reporting bullying at school. If the first committee member you complain to doesn't do anything about it, it's kind of on you to go find another one.
The next one.
Yeah, the next one and
Yeah.
the next one until you get someone who will help. And that's not how it should be. But I'll echo Jay. Get friends. Get a group to help you. To have the courage.
I add to that, Don, that I had an experience a year or so back at a convention. It wasn't with me, but my wife, where we approached the convention and said, this is a situation that troubles us enough that we can't come there unless we have assurances that this will be taken care of. Initially, the committee said they would handle it, but when we arrived, nothing had been done. Fortunately, and this is what happened, when you have friends, the friends rise up and they rally around the cause. So they will be the support unit. That's why it's important at a convention or any social function to just get to know people.
Yeah.
And before they get to know you, they understand your situation, your life, and not only do you find friends, but you find that support network that a lot of people are afraid to seek. I think that's why Pam loves going to conventions all the time now, is because she met so many wonderful people. And she knows that if she's in trouble, she only has to go a couple of 100 yards away to find somebody who she will feel comfortable with. And I think that's what we all need to think about when we start getting back to real getting in front of each other again.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, back in the 70s, when I first started going to conventions, I was a teenager. The person taking us to these conventions was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Martin, who is part of First Fandom. He unfortunately has passed away. Because he was a member of First Fandom, he knew a lot of the people there. And we got what in the South we called our science fiction uncles. And these were older men who would basically look after the kids and make sure that they didn't get into trouble. But we also knew that if somebody was harassing us or giving us a problem or wouldn't leave us alone, we had people we could go to. And most of the uncles were actually on the committee and all the rest. So it made it a lot easier that they would take care of it for us. I had one guy who would not leave me alone. And, you know, I had my brother Sean with me. It's like we were in a group and he kept trying to separate me. We were at a party and he kept trying to separate me from the group. And Sean, my brother, saw what happened and immediately got Uncle Timmy. And Timmy came over and basically not so politely invited him to leave now, you know? So I think we had a little more freedom at a convention because we were known quantities. They knew who our parents were, you know, and who we were, you know, so they kept an eye on us. It's why Caroline got to run around conventions at an early age. Because if I take her to Farpoint, everybody knows who she is, who comes to Farpoint regularly, you know, and she knew all these different people she could go to if she had any problem. And there was one time she did. And she went and found one of the security people and explained the situation. And he said, do you mind if I walk around with you and your friend for a bit? You know, just we'll walk through the dealer's room and all the rest. And if you see this guy, point him out because I want to know who he is. You know, and I'm forever grateful to that individual because, you know, it allowed Caroline to continue to enjoy the convention without having to look over her shoulder the entire time. So.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of women are not raised to be assertive, and there are a lot of men who will attack assertive women, you know, and try to beat it out of them, figuratively, and so you kind of get one of the answers I hear often to harassment is, well, she needs to be more assertive. You know, she needs to stand up for herself, and that is not fair. That's not.
It's a double standard.
It is. It's not something that, you know, if you yourself are an assertive person, it's hard to understand that some people are not.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, it's very hard to confront someone. Even to go ask for help is a hard thing for some people to do. And
Mm-hmm.
and the more we can be aware of that, the better off. Men need to learn not to be assholes, Elizabeth says. Completely true. Absolutely true.
Well, at Dragon Con, there is two groups I know. I've worked with both of them. That literally they have a ribbon on their badge that basically make them a safe haven. And women know this, and men know this too, because they need it. They need it too. Is, you know, if you find somebody with one of those ribbons, go talk to them, and you know, they will either get somebody at the convention to help, or they will stay with them until the problem goes away. I was at Dragon Con a couple years ago. I've been to so many Dragon Cons, I don't remember what it was. But I noticed a young lady who was obviously tipsy. I mean, it was pretty obvious she had a few more than she probably needed. And there was this guy who was boxing her in, you know, and apparently had bought drinks for her, you know, so I think he was assuming that there would be something happening. So I go, I see what's happening. Another friend of mine kind of was keeping an eye on the situation. I went and got these two guys I know, the twins, who are professional bouncers. and they do some security stuff for Dragon Con. So I grabbed the twins and took them over there, and basically they escorted her to her room and made sure she got there safely. And the other one read the riot act to the guy who was misbehaving. And he was drunk too, and he's saying, well, she wanted it. And I think he was lucky because he stood a good chance of getting belted at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So we've learned to look after our own.
Yeah.
But not everybody knows, that we have people at the convention who are there to make sure that you feel safe at the convention. And I'm not just talking security,
I have a friend who is really incredibly smart, and we were at a con, and it was the same sort of situation. A young woman was being boxed in by a predatory guy, and my friend walked over and kind of pushed past the guy and looked at the woman and said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. I want to talk about that thing at work. Come on over here, we'll talk." She didn't know the girl, but the girl accepted that, and so she brought her over and said, "Is this guy bothering you? Do you need help? Anything like that?" And she said, "Yeah. Is it okay if I just hang around with you guys for a little bit?" And sure, that's fine.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a brilliant way to approach it.
Yeah, I haven't seen you in ages. Let's go catch up.
I know we're kind of short on time, but one of the things that crossed my mind as you're talking about that is, in fandom, there's a kind of a Harvey Weinstein level of activity. You can't dig too deep without finding stories about people in fandom who groom fans and who use their position inappropriately, and it's up to those around them to not remain silent and not condone those behaviors. In the last couple of weeks, I've read Facebook outpourings, just people just having to get their stories of years of relationship abuse based on the fact that this person had a status within fandom, and they were convinced that this person made them. It's tragic to hear that. We have to be a little bit more mindful and responsive when we hear those stories, or at least listen when somebody's hurting in that way. So it's not just the anonymous abuser. There are a lot of people who abuse their power.
That's
well,
very true.
We discovered later in our fandom that one of the guys that was at these conventions, who I found a little creepy, so I steer clear, couldn't come to conventions anymore because he was convicted of child molestation.
Yeah.
So, there is that. And women can be, I totally agree. Female predators exist as much as male predators. And sometimes that's the harder one to get rid of.
Yeah.
Because, it's a woman. Well, she's just, there's this thing about, you don't want to, I won't say offend, but, it's hard when a woman is in a position of power and is abusing that power to convince others that she's doing it, because especially if you are a, cis male, you're just jealous because she's actually in a position of power, because that's not, women can do stupid things too.
I certainly, in the library, I certainly ran into a number of managers who were certifiably insane and should never have been allowed to, be in charge of people. And one in particular who just had a thing about guys. She didn't like men and didn't want to have them around. And if she supervised them, they could never do anything right. And That's and it is a tough. It's a very tough situation to get a hold
Sorry
of.
to interrupt, but we are out of time.
We're out of time. Well, thank you very much, folks.
Thanks, guys.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
I usually let you talk a minute or two more, but Kathleen's needed another panel.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome.
Jay, good to see you.
Good to see you, Don. Bye, Kathleen. Hope she's gone.
Bye.